If you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you return to the channel, welcome back. Just want to say thank you for tuning in. Back in the day when people used to do things like go to the mall, one of my favorite snacks were cinnamon sugar pretzels, and specifically the cinnamon sugar pretzel bites. I can recall going to the mall with my best friend one time and I had a craving for my favorite snack, so I stopped by the pretzel place. After I got my order, I handed my debit card to the cashier. When she went to run it, it actually didn't go through, which was kind of weird. So she tried it a couple more times and it didn't work still. She asked me if I had another way to pay, and at the time I didn't, so I just took my card back and I was going to go to the ATM, which is at the center of the mall. I figured there was just something wrong with my credit card, or rather my debit card, and I would just go there, pull out some cash, and make sure everything was okay. Well, when I got to the ATM, it turns out that there actually was something wrong. My account balance said negative $43. See, I had overdrafted my account by $8 and got hit with a $35 overdraft fee. All for a bag of cinnamon sugar pretzels. Which brings us to today's video. I got my first job as a senior in high school, and it was really towards the end of my senior year anyway, so basically I got my first job when I graduated. And while I knew it was important to save money, that was basically the extent of my financial knowledge. And as you'll soon find out, I wasn't even very good at implementing that knowledge. Now, I know there are a ton of money mistakes that I made as a teenager, but I really just wanted to focus on some of the bigger ones that I could actually think back on and identify. So here are 7 mistakes that I made as a teenager when it came to money, all ranging from the ages of 13 years old to 19 years old. My very first money mistake was not realizing that I had an income. At 13, it was really hard for me to think of money as an income because income was something that I had synonymized with having a job. And like I said, I really didn't have that opportunity until I turned 18. But looking back now, I realized that the money that I was receiving from like birthdays, holidays, and even little side hustles like selling candy or house sitting and pet sitting for friends and family, that was technically an income. Instead, I was always looking at that money I'd received as like gifts or little prizes that I could spend to buy things in the short term, like new tech or new gadgets or new video games. But if I'd really thought of that money like an income, I think there was a possibility that I would have treated it a little better, maybe made a budget around how I was saving and spending some of it, and not thinking so short term and planning for the long term. My second mistake was not opening up a bank account as soon as possible. I didn't open my first bank account until I was 18 years old, which meant that any money that I was lucky enough to hold on to that wasn't burning a hole in my pocket, I was just holding on to it as cash. For some reason, I didn't understand or think about the fact that having a savings account is like really valuable or important, which is kind of dumb because it's in the name, savings account. And come to think of it, I didn't even approach my parents or ask them to open a savings account for me. I didn't ask them for any advice. None of it. I didn't even think of it. Now, this is really unfortunate because I ended up doing some math on this, and if I had opened a high yield savings account with an interest rate of 1.5% and just contributed $20 a month from the age of 14 to 18, when I graduated, that account would have had $989.98 just waiting for me. But instead, I never opened an account, I never saved any of that money, and when I turned 18, I didn't have this basically $1,000 bank account waiting for me. Also, I mentioned a high yield savings account. If you don't know what that is or why you should be putting your money into one, don't worry, I'm probably going to make a video about that in the future. My third mistake was not getting a credit card as soon as I turned 18. Now, I know that's probably going to be a little bit controversial, especially since a lot of parents probably wouldn't recommend that their 18-year-olds get credit cards, but just hear me out. When I first started making money, I paid for everything with my debit card or with cash. I had this really weird idea in my head that debt was this horrible thing and credit cards cause debt, so I would just never get a credit card. And I ended up sticking to that mentality for quite a while. In fact, I think it was like another 5 or 6 years before I ended up getting a credit card. What I should have done was educated myself on how important it is to start building up your credit early, as well as using credit cards in a way that could allow me to avoid some of the common pitfalls that people experience when using them. Doing something like getting a secured credit card where the spending limit was backed by a deposit, as well as setting up automatic payments so I never had a missed or a late payment, would have been great first steps for me to take to building up my credit score. But I didn't realize back then that if I ever wanted to get a loan, buy a house, or even qualify for leasing my own apartment, I would need to have some kind of credit history. So my advice would be don't avoid credit cards. Instead, just try to educate yourself on how you can use them in a way that's going to help you and mitigate any risk you think you might be exposing yourself to. In the end, they're a great tool and they have a ton of advantages. My fourth mistake was spending way too much money on food and clothes. I got bit by this really weird fashion bug when I was like 18 and 19 years old. I was looking at a lot of jeans and jackets, sweaters, shoes, any kind of clothing items I could find online that I thought were cool or unique. I had this idea in my head that if I could find things that were kind of ahead of the times in terms of style, then I don't know, I would stand out maybe. And it did kind of work. I was finding things and people were complimenting my fashion choices sometimes and asking me where I bought things. But in the long run, I realized that it just wasn't worth it for me. I was spending a lot of money, and most of those clothes, I don't even have them now because either A, they don't fit me anymore, or B, they were just taking up way too much space in my closet or in my dresser. And even if you're not trying to stay with the times or ahead of the times in terms of fashion, the fact is clothes are just expensive in general. On top of spending a bunch of money on clothes, I was also eating out a ton. This is around the time that I actually got introduced to and became addicted to sushi, which isn't cheap. To make matters even worse, I was actually working at a sushi restaurant, so it made it ridiculously convenient to just buy discounted meals when I was working. The reality of the situation was I was still living at home with my parents, and they always kept a pantry stocked with tons of food, and anytime that they cooked food, they made plenty of it for me to have as well. That's something I definitely should have taken more advantage of instead of just wildly spending money on sushi. My fifth mistake was not checking my bank account regularly. Now, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually true. See, my first job was as a busboy and a dishwasher at a sushi restaurant, and it was fairly busy, which meant I was getting full-time hours, and on top of that, we made cash tips on every night that we worked. The place was pretty busy regularly, so I always had some cash on hand, and when we got paid every 2 weeks, I was just shoving my paychecks into the ATM and spending without tracking any of it. In fact, I think it got so bad that there were certain points where I was actively avoiding looking at my bank account because I knew I was spending more money than I should have. And see, that's the kind of mentality that causes you to overdraft on cinnamon sugar pretzels at the mall. My sixth mistake was not having a budget at all. Like I mentioned in the previous mistake, I was just having a lot of cash on hand, and on top of that, whenever I got paid, I would just stick my money into the bank account and not even think twice about spending it. My parents were allowing me to live with them at the time because I was paying my way through college, which basically meant my only financial responsibility, because they didn't charge me rent, was just paying for my college courses. So after I got those bills paid, pretty much all of the money that I had left over, I considered free spending. And as you know now, that was all basically just sushi and clothes. So for my seventh and final money mistake, this one's actually kind of funny because before I was doing all this short-term thinking and just like reckless spending, I actually thought it would be a good idea to start investing my money. This was actually a goal of mine in high school, and I had even bought some books on learning how to invest in the stock market and playing some investment strategy games that I had found online. After I opened my first bank account at 18 years old with like some graduation money and probably my first paycheck, I also opened an investment account with an online bank. See, my plan was to take my paychecks and make small contributions to my investment account so that way I could get into the market early. And once I got my first set of paychecks, I totally forgot and ignored my investment account that I had opened up and never contributed a single dollar. Now, this is a huge bummer because I had done all this research and had these great plans to invest in stock like Tesla, Amazon, Google, and Apple. Okay, that's actually totally not true. I didn't have any of those plans. In fact, I didn't even know what Tesla stock was, and there was no way that I was saving up enough money at the time or making enough money at the time to buy even a single share of Google, Apple, or Amazon stock. But had I invested even anything at all into just like little index funds or mutual funds, I would have realized some pretty big gains by now. See, the key to investing is to get started as early as possible, and while I had these great plans, I just never followed through on them, and that was a big missed opportunity. So there you have it, 7 money mistakes that I made as a teenager, and it is a little embarrassing to think back on the fact that I overdrafted on some cinnamon sugar pretzels, as well as missed out on Tesla stock when it was only $19.20. I'm reminded that I am actually happy that I made these mistakes and made them early. At the end of the day, this is all just a big learning process, and the whole point of this is for me to share it with you so that way you don't make the same mistakes as I did. So with that said, just try to do these simple 5 things. Make sure you're checking your bank account regularly, make a budget, save some of your money, get a credit card and use it wisely, and if you can, get started investing early. Please like and comment down below. It's going to let me know if you want to see more content like this. Subscribe if you want to stay up to date, and I'll see you all next time.